And Tony Irwin is coming back to Afternoons. I've had him on the program before. He's a nuclear engineer. He's also the technical director of SMR Nuclear Technology. Welcome back to the program, Tony.
Thank you, Sophie.
Now, for those who haven't heard us speak before, if you could just tell us a little bit about the beginning of your career. In the UK, you spent 3 decades working for, commissioning and operating 8 nuclear power reactors for British Energy.
Yes, that's right. I worked on all the big nuclear power reactors in the UK. And then in 1999, I came to Australia and joined ANSTO, and I was reactor manager for the new Opal reactor at Lucas Heights.
And I know that that's because you fell in love with an Australian, aren't you? Good. So I can imagine then, since 1999, Tony, you have been having this conversation with Australia and Australians around what it could look like if we had opened our minds to the possibility of nuclear energy 25 years ago.
And it's still not too late. No, the best time to have done it was 20 years ago, but the next best time is obviously now and as soon as possible.
So what did you interpret from the GenCost CSI report then? Were the right questions being asked?
So let's have a look at the GenCost report, because it's important to have a look how they construct that. So the first thing is that the people that produce it are economists, so they need technical information. And Oricon are very good and provide all the information about technologies, all except nuclear. So they don't do nuclear. The last time CSIRO contracted for nuclear was GHD in 2018. That's been disputed at all nuclear inquiries, and CSIRO even admitted that the basis was not clear. So they don't get expert advice for nuclear. So the second thing is that when they look at capacity factors, which is the actual amount of electricity that's produced, they don't look at the technology capacity factor. So nuclear should be sort of 95%, but in their report it's down to sort of 53% to 89%. So that makes a big difference. They take figures for, say, solar and wind of 19 to 32% for solar. But if you look at the actual solar worldwide last year in 2023, down in June, solar's down to sort of 13%.
Yeah.
And then 27% in December. So there's huge changes in it. And what they quote are capital costs. So they say nuclear is 8,656 per kilowatt.
Yeah.
Solar is 1526 per kilowatt. Therefore, nuclear is far too expensive to even consider. But you've got to take into account the capacity factor. So you've got to multiply the solar one by 4 to be able to compare the costs. So people, just don't realise these sort of things.
I wondered when I read the report, and believe me, I found most of it too difficult to quite understand, is that we asked the question, though, about a large-scale nuclear reactor in that particular report, and they said it would take almost 20 years to build. There's been plenty of other conversations around what the new technology looks like. Now, you're the technical director of SMR Nuclear Technology. It's a company that you founded here in Australia. And you've said to me in the past that the actual time of construction for an SMR would actually be 36 months. You add to that about 4 years for things like site selection, consultation, feasibility studies, the environmental impact and all of those sorts of things. So the time that would be required is actually around 7 years. If we were to see a ban lifted on nuclear tomorrow, is that still your belief?
I think it's going to take a little bit longer now, but certainly less than 10 years. And we've got a good example in Australia. The Opal reactor, our new research reactor, from announcement to full power was less than 9 years. So, we can do it if we want to.
And so just to remind everybody, when we talk about the reactor at Opal, this is the second reactor that now is a part of ANSTO, that you said. It's our nuclear science and technology that we use in Australia. So we've got it to be able to do things in the field of medicine and industry and research and those sorts of things. And I guess that gets me to the next question, and one that's come in from listeners, and that is that we have this mental block to overcome when it comes to nuclear waste. So can you tell us what happens to what is a relatively small amount of waste that we currently generate through those sorts of applications that I just mentioned?
Yes, so the day-to-day waste is only very low-level waste. So it's cleaning materials, used clothing, etc., packed into barrels. You can stand beside them. ANSTO have got a few thousand in a shed waiting for a central repository. So that's all you get on day-to-day. Even a big nuclear power plant produces about 2 shipping containers a year of this low-level waste, so very small quantities.
Yeah, because everyone's like, nobody wants it in their backyard. What are we going to do? I think there's this perception, which I have to say is also being peddled politically, because I noted after the report came out and obviously Peter Dutton saying, yes, we should look at nuclear, and the government saying, no, we shouldn't. I was really annoyed by a tweet that came out from a Western Australian politician that used words like half-baked yellow cake, nuclear reactors would cost a bomb, like this sort of language that is meant to be charged to try and continue to keep this narrative going that nuclear energy is evil and potentially dangerous.
Western Australia is really interesting because they've actually got a low-level waste repository at Sandy Ridge. This is the TELUS operation, and they're taking low-level waste from anywhere in Australia now.
Yeah.
So we've actually we have a low-level waste storage capacity.
So the SMR technology, is it proven? What would it look like if we were to try and go down that path? What sort of what and how could it power things? Is it potentially something that could go into retiring existing coal-fired power stations, or does it look completely different? If you could crystal ball the future, if you were able to say, here's a proposition, or maybe you've put it forward, what would it look like?
So small reactors have been around for 60 years. They power all the nuclear power submarines, so they're very common. But the ones for generation are just coming out now. And as you say, they would be ideal for repowering coal-fired power station sites. In Queensland, Gladstone, big site there, 6 big coal-fired units, retiring in 2035. Now, it would be ideal to replace that with SMRs. You've got all the infrastructure there. You've got the transmission, you've got the cooling water, but importantly, you've got the staff, and you retrain the staff for a nuclear power plant. And this is what Bill Gates is doing in Wyoming in the US. They've got a retiring coal-fired power station. They're going to repower it with an SMR, and they're going to retrain the staff.
What's the cost? What would be the cost here?
So my estimate at the moment is about $2 billion for a 300 megawatt unit.
That's a long way from $17 billion that we've been told.
It's a long way, yes. No, and then you look at Snowy 2.0, which is now $12 billion, and you think, I could get 6 SMRs for that.
And that technology, Tony, you're saying is available to us. If we were to decide to at least look at this in a more, fulsome way, if there were to be a GenCost CSIRO report done that asked a different question that said, what would an SMR look like going into a coal-fired retiring power station? The answer would have been very different.
Yes, because they only consider greenfield sites. They won't consider reusing the existing site.
So in your...
They won't take into account the lifetime of nuclear. So nuclear is 60 years, and many extended to 80. But in their report, they're only using an economic life, so they say 30-year life. So that's obviously going to make a big difference to the cost as well.
We keep talking about it, Tony, but I guess my final question to you is, obviously, in your opinion, nuclear should be added to the mix of solutions under consideration to power Australia.
Yeah, look at Queensland last night, 90% coal. Last week, there was a big wind drought, The whole of the East Coast had no wind for 3 days. So as soon as the sun went down, there was no renewables on the whole of the West, on the East Coast, New South Wales, South Australia, Victoria, the whole lot. And what your listeners could do is look at a website called opennem.org.au, and you can see in real time the energy mix, and you can see the problems we've got.
And you can also see that we're the only country in the G20 that still has the door closed on nuclear. I don't know whether or not we think we're smarter than everyone else.
Well, I think eventually we're going to realise that it's got to be part of the mix. There isn't one technology that's the whole answer. We need the right system mix.
Thank you for your time, as always, this afternoon, Tony. I dare say I'd love to have you back on again in the future. I'm sure this is a conversation that's going to continue, and eventually we may see some change.
I think we're getting there slowly.
Good on you. That's Tony Irwin. He's the Technical Director of SMR Nuclear Technology. And as I mentioned from the outset, for 3 decades, in fact, over 3 decades, he worked commissioning, operating 8 nuclear power reactors in the UK for British Energy.